Hi, I'm Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television. I'm here with State Senator Jimmy Higdon, who covers Marion County in our viewing area as well as Nelson County. And you kind of go all the way from Casey County up to Louisville.
Right, to Fern Creek.
Fern Creek.
Yes.
So all the way through the state of Kentucky. And we're going to talk about the legislative session, which starts on January the 2nd, 2018. It's a 60-day session this year, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We start, like you said, on Tuesday, January the 2nd at high noon. The Constitution says that the session starts on the first Tuesday after the first Monday at high noon. And so that's when we'll be in session, and it is a 60-day session. It's a budget year.
Okay. And so obviously the budget's going to be a big deal, but also last time I think when we were together talking, the pension was a big issue, which it still is, but there was talk of a special session which never occurred. So evidently that's going to be something that's going to be discussed in the regular session as well, right?
That's correct. Let me before I'm not trying to avoid your question, but let me mention to thank you for all that you do for the community and Marion and Nelson County as far as keeping the public informed on the things that go on. I know you broadcast the fiscal court meetings, and you know there's very few programs that I go to, Gary, that you're not there, and what a service you provide for Central Kentucky, and I want to publicly thank you for that and wish you a happy new year, because it's what you do is invaluable. And I do want to remind folks that on Saturday the 6th of January, always do that the first Saturday of January. I have a prayer breakfast, and this will be the 16th prayer breakfast. It's hard to imagine that this is my 16th year, but I've done it ever since I started. Miss Josephine Knuckles and I started that prayer breakfast, so she passed away. She didn't make it she passed away in December of last year. And so, you know, I've named it, or put her name on it now. It's the Josephine Knuckles 16th Annual Prayer Breakfast that will be held on January the 6th at 8 a.m. at the Lebanon United Methodist Church. Everyone's invited to attend. As the Methodist men put on an outstanding breakfast. It starts at 8 o'clock, and the prayer breakfast the prayer portion starts at 9. Brother Lee Watts, a chaplain to the Kentucky General Assembly, will be the guest speaker. And you know, I encourage everyone. It's a great way to start the year, and it's free, no obligations to anybody. Just that's on Saturday the 6th. So back to the pension. After I got that little plug in, because if I don't, Gary, I'd forget it. The governor talked all along we would have a special session, and there was a bill introduced, well, I guess on the 31st of August, PFM released their report recommendations, and they were pretty stark. And then there was a bill that was put out, and I guess that was in October. And you know, a lot of comments about that bill, a lot of suggestions. I know I worked on that bill to make changes. A lot of constituents weighed in with me, and I worked to make changes on that bill. As we got closer into the time to have a special session, we thought we'd have a special session the 1st of October, and then that didn't work. We thought we'd have it the 1st of November, but with the issues in the House with Jeff Hoover and him resigning as Speaker of the House, and with all those issues, and then trying to get an agreement between the House and the Senate, we simply ran out of time. We've had a lot of discussions about pensions, and there have been a couple of plans that have been sent to the actuaries to be scored. And what a score is to we passed legislation that now, before any pension plan can pass or anything that affects a pension, it has to be looked at by the actuaries and tell us how much it will save or how much it will cost. Mm-hmm. So we're waiting for that to come back, and we will be addressing the pension issue in the upcoming session, which starts January the 2nd. I don't look for anything us taking any action that first week, because, again, a bill hasn't been filed yet, and we don't have the scoring back from the KRS or TRS, Teachers Retirement System, or the Kentucky Retirement System. We don't have either one of those back yet. So, but during the session, we had to address the pension issue, and it's one of those. It is the #1 issue in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Also, this session, Gary will be working on a budget, which our budget is. It's going to be a pretty not a good budget year. It's going to be a tough budget. Mainly, we're looking at least $1 billion, $1 billion with a B, additional payments toward our pensions. We're looking at increased Medicaid costs, and those are costs that we have to pay. And we're looking at increased cost to operate our jails and prisons. Our prison population has increased over the last couple of years from about 20,000 inmates. We're now up to, we've topped 24,000 inmates. And as you heard recently, the state has negotiated with a private prison in Lee County, and it will be opening fairly soon to help relieve the crowding situation we find ourselves in county jails. In Kentucky, primarily right now, we are housing prisoners at the county level. Class D felonies that's where the state contracts with county jails. So there's a lot of overcrowding in county jails right now because of this balloon in the prison population. Like I said, we're up to 24,000 plus and growing every day.
Wow. So with the pension, when there was talk of like the special session and stuff of that nature, there were some, for instance, the governor was proposing some different areas for where the money is going to be made up. And a lot of people on your constituents, I'm sure, got with you regarding those suggestions. What were some of the feedback that you had received?
Well, of course, a lot of folks are encouraging us different ways to find new revenue. And the two new revenues that come up, one was legalization of marijuana. There was often a suggestion that I got, and also casino gaming, legalizing casino gaming in Kentucky, which we've talked about for years. Legalizing marijuana is probably not something that we'll see happen this year, but I will tell you that you'll hear a lot of talk, and I'm sure that before the session is over, we will have a lot of discussions about medical marijuana and or medical cannabis, and so we'll be having a lot of discussions about that. But I don't see in this session a full-scale legalization of marijuana passed in the Kentucky General Assembly. It's we're not there yet. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed, but medical marijuana, I think we can get there, and that's certainly something that I can support. The devil's in the details on that. I haven't seen a bill. There's some bills that there was a bill filed last year that claimed to be a medical marijuana bill, but basically what it was just recreational marijuana disguised as medical marijuana. So for medical marijuana to pass, there has to be some restrictions and some guidelines in is exactly what medical marijuana is and how we'll address it. And like I said, there's been a lot of discussion on that.
Okay. How about the gambling?
The gaming is an issue that, like I said, it's been around forever. If you remember when I ran in 2009 for the Senate, that was a big issue.
Right.
Legalized gaming, and I made the commitment then, and I'll stand by that commitment that I'll support putting it on the ballot and let the people vote on it. But the drumbeat, for that to happen has kind of subsided in the last 4 or 5 years as we've passed through administrative regulations. They've passed this historical racing that's kind of like a slot machine, and and those machines, the racetracks have most of the racetracks now. Churchill doesn't have a facility, but they've just started recently. They just had a groundbreaking for a facility. The old, I think it's Kentucky Downs, or Louisville Downs. They're not far from Churchill Downs. That they're going to turn that into basically a parlor that has these gaming machines that are, just looking at them, you can't see that they're any different than a slot machine. And Keeneland and the Red Mile have already teamed up to do one of those. Some of the tracks in Western Kentucky already have had those for years and have been doing very well with them. And it kind of quieted two of the groups that were supporting legalized gaming in Kentucky. The horse owners, these gaming machines, this betting that's going on with them, is providing purse money and breeders' incentives to the horse owners, and it's made them very happy. It's put a lot of money back into the horse industry, where they were up until the last couple of years they had to go out of state to get that type of purses or breeding incentives, and it's made the tracks very happy. They're taking in additional revenue from these slot machines. So those two groups have really been out of the game and have not pushed for legal expansion of gaming really for the last 4 or 5 years. And so it just recently came back up as we're talking about a way to this $1 billion or $2 billion a year, depending on what scenario you look at for the pensions. We need a lot of additional revenue, and so you can only get that in a couple different ways. One, you can cut the budget, you can cut money from existing programs, or two, you can find additional revenue.
Right. So have these new historic gaming things, have they generated new revenue?
Some, not a tremendous amount. Like I said, most of that revenue is going to breeders' incentives and purses at the racetrack and to the racetracks. The state gets a cut, but it's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's very small in the scheme of things.
Right. Okay. So we have the budget and the pension being a big part of that budgeting issue. That will be big for the next 60 days in the session that's going on. And what are some of the other major issues that you're hearing discussed?
Well, we'll probably take a look at tax reform. Right now we have about exemptions. We exempt a lot of things from taxes. Right now we take in close to $11 billion a year in revenues. We exempt about $13 billion, and things such as sales tax on groceries, sales tax on medicines, sales tax on a whole variety of things that we exempt from sales taxes. And so as we start to look at that, like I said, I just mentioned two of the largest ones, the sales tax on medicine and the sales tax on groceries. I don't think that anything will be done with that, but that's just an example of the $13 billion in tax exemptions that we give. And so we'll be looking at those, and under tax modernization, we'll bring all those out and take a look at them and see which ones are productive and which ones are not, and make some decisions on those. That is one way to come up with additional revenue that we'll need to balance our budget.
Yeah, because we've done, I think since we've been doing these interviews too, we've been talking about the tax modernization as well, or tax reform.
We've been talking about tax reform. There was a 2002 study done by Dr. Fox from Tennessee called the Fox study, and he talked about Kentucky's need to reform our taxes, and there's 4 basic taxes in Kentucky. Our property tax and our sales tax are relatively low compared to the surrounding states. Our personal income tax and our corporate income tax were higher than other states. And so, there was a look at how do you broaden that tax base. One of the problems we've had, and this is a perfect time of year to make this comparison. You want your tax structure to grow with the economy, and our income taxes have probably done that, but our sales taxes have not. And the main culprit, the main reason our sales tax, if you look back, the growth in our sales tax over the last 10 years, it's been very slow. It hasn't kept up with the growing economy, which our economy is growing in the state, 2 and 3%, and our sales tax revenue has not grown that much, and the main reason it has not is internet sales. And everybody in the viewing audience, just about everybody bought something via the internet during Christmas. Now, if you got it from Amazon, you paid sales tax. But if you bought from some other places out of state, they do not collect sales tax for us.
And technically, we're supposed to.
Technically, we're supposed to report that. That's the law. If you ever had a tax audit, they could assess you for those sales taxes that you didn't pay on those items that you bought over through the internet.
Right.
And but that's one of the reasons we need to modernize. When back in the 50s, when this tax plan was put into effect, there was no such thing as internet sales and UPS. You bought everything locally, and you went to a brick and mortar store and you bought a product and you paid sales tax on it. That's not always the case anymore. So that's one of the reasons we had to modernize our tax code. And so we'll be addressing that. There's a lot of several constitutional amendments that have been proposed. One constitutional amendment would change the elections. Right now, we elect the governor in our statewide offices in an off year. There'd be a constitutional amendment to move that to the presidential election year. It would save the state a lot of money by moving that, and should help voter participation. You look back at the last governor's race. I think we had about 20% participation in the governor's race. And that's not real good. There's there's another constitutional amendment is called Marcy's Law, and it gives citizens of Kentucky, crime victims, it gives them some rights, and that's very good. Judicial redistricting will be taking a look at the legislature and cities and counties, even magisterial districts. Everybody that votes. Every 10 years, there's a census, and all the voters are redistricted to make sure that every district has the same number of voters.
Right.
And it's in the U.S. Constitution and the Kentucky Constitution that one person, one vote. And so we and the ones that get the most attention are the congressional redistricting and the legislative redistricting. But you look back and there's no judicial redistricting. We haven't done any redistricting with our judicial system for years and years and years. And you have places like Eastern Kentucky that's lost population. They have judges that have a very low caseload as far as people in their courtroom. And then you go to Northern Kentucky and Boone County, where the judges there have a extremely high workload. Nelson County has grown quite a bit, and there's a need for an additional judge in Nelson County under a redistricting plan that we did last year, and it didn't pass. But under that redistricting plan, Nelson County, I think, was going to get a family court judge. But that passed the Senate, but it did not pass the House. So that will be back up again this year too. So. A lot of issues. There'll be a lot of bills introduced, Gary, probably over 1,000 pieces of legislation, and so we'll see a lot of bills, and there'll get be a lot of media will pick up on some of those bills. Like I was telling you, I heard this morning somebody was filing a bill to do have a constitutional convention for the state of Kentucky to redo the Kentucky Constitution. That bill's filed. I'll get a lot of emails on that.
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky's Constitution is it does need some work, but I'm not sure if this bill addresses exactly what we need to do. I don't know. I haven't read it. I just heard rumors that there was one coming.
Now, also, recently you had sent out a press release with regard to the Stephen Foster Amphitheater in Nelson County. And can you give us an update on, first of all, what's going on with that and how it's looking for the amphitheater in the future?
Yeah, it's, we kind of have, it's kind of a two-pronged approach there. The amphitheater needs a lot of work. In fact, we've looked at that for a couple years now, and we appropriated money last year or 2 years ago for maintenance and unscheduled maintenance needs at our state parks. And I really thought that Stephen Foster, the amphitheater, the Talbot Amphitheater there would be able to get some of that money and be able to work on some of those.
Because it does fall under the state park system.
It does. And but there were so many needs for that. I think it was $18 million. There was just so many needs for that $18 million. We were unable to get any for the state park or for the Stephen Foster story. And we did get some people to come in and look. We wanted them to see how bad it was. When they saw how bad the state of repair that it was in, they became very concerned. In fact, they were so concerned that last week they closed it down and put it off limits. Now, we will try in the budget to get money if the state park does a bonding issue to work on the parks. We will try to get Mo Kentucky Home and the Stephen Foster story included in that. Representative McCoy and I will work on that. But that's a long-term fix. That could take 2 or 3 years. And this theater is basically shut down because of safety concerns. So what we're trying to do now, and Judge Dean Watts has stepped up and is working with he has been working with some local contractors and looking at a way that we can, the state can lease the amphitheater to the county, where the county could go in and work on it, short term, mm-hmm. and make the needed repairs so we can have that theater ready to go in June. The county can work very, very quickly. They don't have to go through all the bureaucracy that the state does to get a contract and review it and have engineering done. The state can go in and excuse me, Gary, and put together a plan very quickly. And I know talked to Judge Watts the other day. He already has a local contractor that's agreed to come in and do a considerable amount of work. I know there's a GoFundMe page that's been started. And one of the things that I said in my news release, I think the Nelson County and the city of Bardstown, we were delivered a load of lemons, and now it's time to make some lemonade out of that. And I think the community will come together and that the show will go on, that with Judge Watts and the group there in Nelson County will pull together and we'll have the amphitheater, ready to go for June performances. Now, will it be exactly what we want? Probably not, but it will be something that will allow the show to go on.
Right.
And I think we can do that at the local level. Now, we're still working to get permission from the state to do that. We've made that proposal to them. And like I said, Representative McCoy and I will be working, and I said, Mayor Higdon and Judge Watts have both been, very active in trying to find a solution to get this done, because it is important to the people of Nelson County and Bardstown. It's Stephen Foster, the story's been around for a long time. It does bring a lot of tourists to Nelson County.
Right.
So it's something that we will make sure that the show goes on, and we are working on that. So it is a priority to see that happens. And like I said, a two-pronged approach. One, to get it ready to go in the short term, and two, to try to find some money to redo the amphitheater, redo it completely. Now, that lease that the state's had with the Stephen Foster folks is, it's a very old lease that needs to be updated, and some new agreements to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. That there's
Right.
money set aside for repairs and maintenance, and that we don't run into this problem again, where we have a theater that gets in this bad of repair.
Yeah. So also another issue is in Marion County. We were discussing before that there was a vote in the last election or so about the nickel tax with the schools, and with that passing, the Marion County school system has the opportunity to bond for more money just because of that passing. However, they're really hoping for getting a matching from the state, which has historically happened, but because of the way the state is currently with budgeting situations, what do you see happening there?
Well, I had a lot of calls during the special election, or not the special election, but during the election, asking me about the recallable nickel, if the state would match it. And all I could say, historically, we've always matched the nickels. We've always done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's ever been a time when we're going into a budget session that the budget dollars have been so tight. So to sit here today and tell you that I'm 100% sure that we will match those nickels, I can't say that. I'd say right now it's probably a 50-50 chance. There's a lot of school systems, just like the Marion County school system, that passed a recallable nickel in the past 2 years, with the understanding with the hopes that the state would match that nickel.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we continue to match nickels all over the state. We have, I don't know how many counties have and school districts have a recallable nickel, but there's a lot of them, and we've matched them every year faithfully since their inception. And we will look at that, and I'm certainly will be working to see that happens. But as we speak today, like I said, it's about a 50-50 proposition. I could not promise that will happen. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it doesn't look near as good that they'll be matched as it did when the last election, when they were passed, and mainly because of the pension issue. We had a budget shortfall this last budget. We still have $150 million that the governor has to make up between now and the 30th of June. So we have a budget shortfall this year. We're looking at next year with at least $1 billion in additional pension obligations, increased Medicaid payments, and increased prison population. So, budgets are priorities. That's what you do. You set your priorities, and so we'll just have to see where I want to say there's 20 school systems that have passed a recallable nickel since we last met, had a budget session. So there'll be 20 school systems that will be very interested to see what happens in this year's budget.
Absolutely. Okay. And so, as you said, there's a lot on the agenda for this upcoming legislative session that's going to be taking place starting on Tuesday, January the 2nd. It's a 60-day session and a budget year that's going to go through there. And you're always happy to hear from your constituents, right?
I am, and You know, my constituents have been very good at communicating with me. There's several ways they can do that. They can call me at home at it's 270-692-6945. They can email me. It's my legislative email address is jimmy.higdon@lrc.ky.gov. And then we have the legislative message line, which is 1-800-372-7181, and that's a very efficient way to communicate with us. In fact, when we're in session, that you can be watching the 10 o'clock news and see something that's going on in Frankfurt, and that legislative message line Monday through Friday is open until 11 p.m. So you can call, you know, you get an idea late at night that you need to communicate with me, and to just call that legislative message line, and I'm sure you'll show that number across the bottom of the screen, Gary, and as you typically do.
Yes. So get in touch with our state senator, Jimmy Higdon, and let him know your feelings on the various different issues as they come up during the next few months of the legislative session. Thank you for coming for this update.
Well, thank you.
And congratulations as well. We want to mention that with this new legislative session, Senator Higdon is second in command, right, at the state Senate.
That is correct. In fact, I'll be sworn in on Tuesday, the January the 2nd, as the Senate President Pro Tem. And so I guess that's, you know, it is a real honor from not only that my constituents have voted me in to be their senator, but that my colleagues have voted for me to be their President Pro Tem. So it's quite an honor, and one that I take very seriously. And just want to thank everybody for their support. And
now you had been
wish everybody a happy New Year, Gary.
You had been the whip.
I was the majority whip for 3 years.
Three years.
And you know, a lot of people wonder, you know, what's a whip do? It comes from an old, I guess, term, a fox hunting term. The whip was the person that kept the dogs in the pack. And so every, I guess, legislative organization has a whip, and he's the person that counts votes. And that's basically what I did. And a lot of people ask me, well, what does a whip do? And I said, well, you know, you very seldom ever see a bill that comes to the House or Senate floor for vote that fails. And the reason for that is the whip has counted the votes, and if a bill doesn't have the votes to pass, then it simply doesn't go to a floor for a vote if it doesn't have the votes to pass. So that's what the whip does. So I enjoyed that position, and like I said, with the President Pro Tem position, I look forward to serving.
And is that for, how long is that?
I will finish out Senator David Givens, the previous Pro Tem, for his wife's health reasons, but she recently had passed away. Our condolences to Senator David Givens and his family. But I'm finishing out his term, and so at the end of, I guess in 2019, there will be elections for the to re-elect a President Pro Tem along with the other leadership positions. So I will be the Pro Tem for at least a year, and like I said, I plan to run for it again. So hopefully I'll be elected to another term next time.
Well, again, we're talking with State Senator Jimmy Higdon. This has been Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television.
Thank you, Gary, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.